Welcome back to this episode of Adventures with Annie Peguero. Don't forget to go over to my website at anniepeguero.com and sign up for my masterclass, Service Based to Thousands. This is the Adventures with Annie Peguero podcast. This podcast is dedicated to helping badass women get out of your comfort zone and into alignment with your soul's purpose. You are going to find these episodes valuable and transformational. Thank you for listening. Welcome back to this episode of Adventures with Annie Peguero. Don't forget to go over to my website at anniepeguero.com and sign up for my masterclass, Service Based to Thousands. I'm honored to have as my guest today, Sarah Carter. Sarah is an author and professional coach. Her new book called All About Change is out right now on Amazon. You could go over to her website at inwiththenewYou.com to get her book. Sarah is a life and leadership coach with a passion for helping others become the best version of themselves. So this is fascinating. Her 11-year career as an officer in the U.S. Navy began as a pilot flying missions around the world and concluded as an officer in the White House military office. So I love Sarah's story. She is now a mom and military spouse. So to say that she has lived through some change would be an understatement. You got to get this book, and I'm excited for you to hear this episode with Sarah. All right, welcome back to the podcast. I'm here today with fellow life coach and success coach, Sarah Carter. As you heard from her, the intro I gave her in the beginning, Sarah has a very colorful background, and she just wrote a book called All About Change. I'm really thrilled to have you on to talk about your book. I have highlighted some things from your book that I want to talk about. I'm going to ask you some questions. Sarah and I, we've known each other for a couple of years now. And I was like, let's not even talk or catch up before we hit record, because I think that, we could start talking about life and change and everything. And we want to capture everything for you because Sarah and I both are in contact with so many women. And one of the main things we hear is like, I really want to change, but I just don't know how. I just got chills because it's such a topic. Like, we are both so passionate about it. You wrote a book about it. Let's just get right into it. Please tell us about you. And we're just going to dig right into this topic.
Yeah. Good morning. Thank you so much for the opportunity to come on and talk about the book and this topic that, I'm absolutely passionate about. You're right. You hit the nail on the head. So many people want to change, but I don't know how, or I can't Google that. But about me, so you said colorful background. I love that phrase. Thank you. Navy to military spouse, living on Okinawa, starting my own business, having a baby all overseas. It's safe to say I've made a lot of changes. And just that period of time with those things was 2.5 years. It wasn't a lot of time. So, the book came with all of that fresh in my mind to really tackle it. But really what inspired the book was I had several clients that did exactly what you said. They found themselves at a sticking point. And while they were all trying to make a different change, they were all stuck with but how do I actually do that? How do I organize that? What are the steps I need to take? What are the things I need to do? And I realized that none of them were different. The end result of their change was different, but the how you got there wasn't different. And it was really funny. I call it the big brown chair effect because it was the big brown chair in my office. Now this big blue chair, but I had this big brown chair in my office, and it seemed like every time people would sit in it, they would get to the crux of their issue. And one of my clients literally said, Sarah, I can't Google my change. It seems like no one's done it. And I'm like, for sure someone has. And that's what got the ball turning was, okay, so how do we walk through this? What are the questions we need to ask? And it started with a workbook I put together just for these 4 clients. And one of them said, you could sell this. I'm like, could I? I don't think so. It probably needs more meat on it. And I put more meat on it. And the questions that are in the book are a lot of the questions we walked through to get those conversations started of how do you do it? What are the little pieces and parts of change that are all the same? We all do it. And a lot of us do it unconsciously, I think. A lot of us set goals. A lot of us work our network, which is when you even think about network in your personal change, people are like, a lot of us reach out to our resources in our local community, but I don't feel that a lot of people really thought of those as the skill sets of change. So that's the book.
Yes. And I love that you pulled from your own experience, that you wrote the questions that you actually asked your clients. And something that you said in the book, and I just have it highlighted here, it says, forces beyond your control will affect your plans for change. That is certainly the story for many of us in the wake of 2020. I feel like, and let's chat about this, like everything that's going on in the external world. When I say external world, like not inside of your body. I mean, that's all circumstance. And we can live from circumstance to circumstance to circumstance if we choose. But you're inviting people to really take a challenge and look at themselves and ask themselves the questions that you added in your book. I love that you wrote coaching question. And the question that you put here is, how did your initial plans for change have to evolve during this challenging season? So speak to the woman right now who is, we're still in this challenging season. We kind of see the light, we're kind of moving in a direction. And I hear a lot of times, well, when all of this calms down, or when I can get my life together, or whatever. So talk about that a little bit, and how your future 80-year-old living room, like the vision that you have. I love that, because we all want to be able to get to that point in our life and look back and say, I did it. Like, I lived my purpose and I lived from my heart, even though there's circumstances and exterior things working against me. So what do you think about that?
Yeah. I didn't want the book to harp on 2020, because change is always going to be around. 2020, 2021 are all behind us, thank goodness. But change is always going to be there. And a lot of people, we do this thing, right? We say when it's a good season, or when I'm not busy, or when I'm not this. But there's never a not. There's, especially in this world where we're 24/7 inundated with what everybody else is doing, there's never going to be that really calm, tranquil, unless you take your life to a very small island like we did. But there's never going to be that not. So things have to evolve and you have to change. I was working with a client the other day, and she got to talking about how when things come back to normal, and she was like, I don't know if I want things to go back to my normal. And we talked about, okay, what do you want things to ultimately look like? Not right now. And I did ask her my favorite question of, what does your living room look like when you're 80? What are the things you really want to have done, accomplished, to be able to have that memorabilia around in your house that you really did it? What are those things? And now how do we evolve the path to get there? Because whatever happened has happened, and so be it. So now what? And I think people get hung up there, and she was certainly hung up there, because her old normal was never coming back. It wasn't going to happen. Her kids had come to where they enjoyed being homeschooled, and they wanted to stay homeschooled. And for them, that's what she was choosing, but she was grieving that old normal and going through this change. So what does your path look like now? And how do we rearrange those goals and work those new resources? Because homeschool is going to be an entirely new set of resources that you haven't had. So how do we examine those? And that is what I mean by don't let it overwhelm you. Don't get stuck in it. You're going to have to move with it. It's very fluid. I write goals all the time, and the path to them changes, but the goal does not. And that's, 80 years away is still far away, and that path is going to change and branch and go in circles a few times. But as long as you keep a clear sight, as long as you keep a clear sight, you'll get there. And that's what that question's all about. And it is one of those questions that really gets people like, oh.
Yeah, it's a good one. So, in your book, you talked a lot about, you shared a lot of beautiful stories. You talked about your dad, you talked about your love of sports, and I really enjoyed that. I want to ask you about your own feeling stuck, your own, grieving a change, because that word right there, I don't think that we give enough attention to in our life.
Yeah.
I feel like we are very much still like living in this, I'm fine, I'm okay, it's no big deal type of culture. And, I've spoke very openly here on my podcast and on my social media about my own marriage struggling so much, almost to the point of separation in 2020. And it was so overwhelming, and the grief of what was about to happen or what could happen in my old way of life and the way that our family looked, it was happening. And I was in it, and I was like, I have to change. We have to change. Yeah. Our family dynamic has to change. And, we got some serious, therapy and coaching and on a healing path. And, here we are today, but there is grief still, grief of what we lost during that time when we were living on Okinawa, when we were really struggling, like grief of what could have been, a more enjoyable time for like in our marriage and our family. Yeah. So I know you have some experience in that, and I want to chat about that because it's not talked about enough. Marriage struggles, divorce, separation, and rebirth through it all are not talked about enough for a variety of reasons. So if you could share with our listeners, because I know this is really going to resonate. It's not easy to talk about, but it helps. Every time we shed light on it, it helps.
You're right. I admittedly shied away from sharing it in this first go around of the book. Since you asked me to start thinking about it, I have a hardcover coming out in May, and they're going to ask me to write another chapter. And this might be the next chapter, because you're absolutely right. People don't talk about it. So yeah, I have experience with it. I got married young. I was 24, and then 3 years later, it all was falling apart, and I got divorced at 28. And to say I handled it poorly is putting it kindly. I didn't handle it. I didn't. I felt like a failure. I felt like a quitter. I felt alone, very alone. And that was a weird feeling because I didn't feel old, but then I did feel old, because in our military world, we find that a lot of people get married young, have a bunch of kids, and, by the time they're 30, their kids are practically off to college. So I already felt like I was behind the curve. And then I felt really old that here I was divorced. And I mismanaged the heck out of that change. I did not accept that change. I pity partied and got mad at everyone but myself. And then sometimes at myself, but mostly mad at everyone else. Drank a lot, very unhealthy amount of drinking. And the only thing I can safely say that I kept on the rails in that season of my life was my job. That was it. And only maybe 3 people knew how much I was struggling through that change. Not very many people knew. It was embarrassing, I felt. But now here I am almost 10 years later, and I'm like, who cares? Tell me about your problems. Please let me help you. Please don't drink to the bottom of a bottle of wine every night. Don't do that. It's not helpful. So what I did after about 7 months of pouting unglamorously and just awful things, I remember distinctly looking at my dog over a bottle of wine that I had just finished and going, something's got to change, dog. This can't keep going on. And I decided right then and there, I set only one goal. I was going to run some sort of race, like, 5K, 10K, whatever, every month. This was New Year's Eve. I was like, I'm going to set this goal of every month this year, I'm going to run a race. And I did. The first couple I did by myself because I was still kind of like, ugh. And then I found a running buddy, a fellow aviator, and she and I ran so much that year. I'm sure if she's listening, or I'm sure she will listen later, that I took her on several where I didn't read the course map beforehand.
Nice.
So we ended up running on sand, up crazy bridges, in awful weather. I mean, and she stuck with me, you know, thank goodness for her. And then from there, after successfully getting through that and that change and that one, like that was my light at the end of the tunnel. If I did these, I got to the end of that year and I was like, oh, I can do this. I'm done working through the literally miles of grief, miles of all those awful, icky feelings, several pairs of tennis shoes. That's what it took. But that was my individual journey. And it might take something different for you. But you can get through it. You know, you find your way. You do find your way. And it feels overwhelming. But divorce has changed. Marriage struggles are changed. You know, now I'm happily married. I have a 1-year-old. We have our problems. We all do. Everyone does. But meeting them head on, like, okay, where are we? That's part of the path. And I mentioned in the book a thing called Just Not This that my dad went through when he was retiring. That's kind of where I got stuck. I got in the just not this. Obviously, this isn't working and I don't want this, but I don't know what I want. And that got that cycle going. And breaking that cycle is kind of it's the way through and on to a successful change.
Boom, like a mic drop. I think, yeah. You talked about how when you were going through the whole divorce process and looking back on it now, it's easy to say, oh, I handled that poorly, or, you know, I really crashed on that one, or I wish I would have done it differently. But in reality, you did, and you were being the best that you could at that time. Like, looking back on it now, like through a different lens, of course, it's easy to say, oh, I should have done this. I should have done that. But really, recognizing that you did the best you could with the skills that you had, with the capacity that you had at that time. And it had to happen in that exact same way in order to go through the grief, to run through the sand, you know, and to get to where you are. So I think that's very powerful for others to hear that, you know, looking back on it, you wouldn't do that same thing today. But recognizing that, you know, I'm thankful it happened that way, and I did the best I can. I love the story about running through the sand and taking that physical challenge, because, I mean, isn't that actual reality? I mean, we tie so much of what's happening intrinsically to the external physical. So like my thing is like, when you want to bring about a change, or a change in habits, a change in mindset, a change in beliefs, a breaking down of limiting beliefs, always attaching something physical, like something tangible that you can actually touch. And for me, I talk about it all the time. I go out in my backyard, and like if I'm working and I want to celebrate something, like even the smallest thing, I go out and I like pick up the earth, and I like get the dirty leaves. I'm looking at all these leaves like in my hands, and I like hug my trees, because that's just me. I want all of the senses. I want to smell it. I want to like even taste it. Like I love dirt. I mean, maybe that's weird, but I love it. And I want to attach that feeling to victory. Victory meaning change and celebration and whatever that small success is. So I know you talk here about life focusing and knowing where you want to go and who you want to ultimately become. So we talked about the pathway, right? Like, so the steps that you're going to take, but would you say that it's not all about knowing exactly what to do. Like everybody's path, like you said, it's the same kind of steps and the same journey, and the outcome is different. But a lot of times we get ourselves into this point. It's like, I physically can't even go through the process because I know what I kind of want it to feel like in the end, but I don't know how to go through the steps, right? Like they just don't know how to go through the steps. And I like how you say, like, change isn't typically drastic, and everything you do brings you closer to that person. So that feeling of stuck, that anxiety, that grief, even grieving something that maybe you don't even think is that, like, and I'm air quoting, like awful, like maybe you enjoy it. Like for me, it was drinking a ton. Like in Japan, those strong zeros, oh my gosh, like the 9% strong zeros, I'd be down at my beach throwing those strong zeros back. And now I'm like over a year alcohol free. And do I grieve drunk Annie? I do. Right. I mean, I was like fun drunk Annie on the beach, you know? I do grieve that. And that's not necessarily, it's not, to me, it was like a fun thing and an unhealthy thing. So grieving that is okay. And just going through that process of allowing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's see. I love, we've talked about this before on live video, where you talked about nothing on active duty prepared you for the transition to civilian life and military spouse life. And you say your life is so full now, but it took a lot of, and I'm going to do the air quoting, like hard work to successfully change, because in everything that I have consumed that you do, that's the only thing that that doesn't feel well with me, because my whole philosophy is like, make it easy, right? Yeah. Make it easy, make it cyclical, make it flow. But I get what you're saying. I understand where you're saying that you actually have to do the things. To be the person, you actually have to do the things. So for our listeners, can you talk about, I guess, like that sentence, like your life is full now, but it took the hard work to successfully change. Tell us about your philosophy on the work that leads to the becoming.
It was not physical work. It was a lot of internal. So I was a Navy pilot. I flew the newest plane out there, which is the equivalent to a 737, a P-8. I have thousands of hours doing this badass thing, right? Now here I am, literally half a world away, no job, no income coming into my bank account that I was very used to. It was good money, Annie. I mean, it was good. Mama was putting bread on several tables. And then all of a sudden it's gone. And to say I pouted is the understatement of the century. I literally didn't talk to Jason for 4 days when he told us we had orders to Okinawa. Literally not at all. I had just gone through my master's program. I was so stoked to become a coach. And here you are moving me literally to the other side of the world, where I cannot coach anyone but my local military population, who's cheap. Let's be real. It was mind blowing. I had a lot of energy. I wanted to do things. I wanted to do my thing. I finally found my thing, and I wanted to do my thing, and dang it, I couldn't, at least not as broadly as I wanted to. So the hard work for me, and I think it will resonate with a lot of people, is the slowing down and the re-examining. Like, okay, Sarah, slow down and take a breath. This doesn't look like what you wanted or what you thought you would have. But what does it look like that fits? And that's where the values piece really stands out. And the hard work comes to really, okay, what are my values? What do I absolutely have to have in my world to be centered? And identifying those, and then putting together the pieces like, okay, so where do I find that valuable work? So for me, it was the Okinawa Leadership Seminar and being a spouse advisor to Jason's command, because those were my things. That was my community. I value relationships so much. And then I value leadership and learning. So the leadership seminar just was like, "Whoa, come work with me." And the spouse thing was a way to get connected to Jason's community, because that's my new community, with him, with me making no money. That was who I was going to need to really connect with. So once I sat on my couch in my sweatpants under my blanket, pouting, and then started figuring out, okay, how do I reevaluate? How do I refocus?
But healing. I feel like you were healing, right?
Yes.
I feel like you were taking it in, you were absorbing it. And even through, I'm like, I'm an action taker. I'm here to help you take action, even if that action looks like sitting on your couch with your whoopee. That's action.
Yeah. Well, I didn't, but I was such a fast-paced, high-energy person that I didn't see it as that. I was like, I've been sidelined. But once I got to a peaceful place with it and really got involved, that was how I made my meaningful change, my meaningful life shift, my success. That's how I made it successfully, was to like, okay, who am I and where do I find that me in my new situation?
I love it. And I love the parallels in our lives. So, when I resigned for love in 2010, I was a federal law enforcement officer. I worked in the most amazing places in the lower 48, Yellowstone, Yosemite, Grand Canyon. I was hanging off 300-foot cliffs at Canyonlands, testifying before grand juries, like bad guys are in jail because of my prison, because of my testimony. And I meet Al and I'm like, I want this change. I want to be a mom. I love him. I want to make this change. I was already tired of uniform patrol. I was already ready to make a shift. So in many ways, looking back on it now, I saw marrying him as my ticket out of there. Yeah. And, we talk about this all the time. We're like, we didn't even know each other. Like, we had been in the physical presence of each other for 45 days. We just knew that we needed to be together. But I'll tell you the same exact thing when I moved my whole life to Okinawa, Japan. And there I was, like, we had this little beach bungalow on the East China Sea in Yomitan, and it was amazing. But I was like, what? I did not sign up for this. Like, now I'm just one of the guys' wives. Like, nobody wants to talk to me. When I try to share my stories, people are like, what are you talking about, lady? I remember walking, they're like, yeah, right. I'm like, I had to chop off a grizzly bear's head that, somebody poached, and then I had to drag the carcass, and they're like, whatever. Nobody cared about my grizzly bear. Nobody cared that I was like hugging a tranquilized wolf. And I'm like, this is badass shit. And people are like, whatever. Are you a Marine? No. So move on. And I was like completely crushed. So I totally understand. And I know other women, maybe it's not this exact same story, obviously. Like, I'm mirroring back what I see from you. I remember walking along this like elevated section of pier, and it was like this little like catwalk kind of thing with like ocean on either side, and I'm walking along it and I'm looking like out like towards China and like thinking back towards the west, and I'm like, I gotta get out of here. I gotta get off this island. I gotta leave this dude. I gotta get back to some normalcy. And it was real panic. Like, I was panicking. I didn't see the path. I didn't see I didn't feel like I had the ability to make the shift that I wanted so badly. I remember trying to get on a Space A flight. I was like, how do I get on a flight? I'm like, I gotta get me to Travis. Right. Yeah. And he was like, what is happening? Like, he's just like, oh, everything's going to be okay. And I was in full on, I must control. I must take action. I couldn't get into the whoopee underneath the couch. It wasn't possible within me to get there, So yeah, I love that you shared that, because for a lot of people, I feel like they just don't feel like they have the capacity to allow it to sink in, to allow that reality to happen. And we are just here to share with you that it's okay, that there are, people who have similar stories, similar situations that can help you. Oh my goodness. All right. Let me look through my notes here.
Yeah.
Of the things that I wanted to chat with you about. I just love that you talk about vision, you talk about focus, and that nothing, really nothing can prepare you. It's just sitting in it and, and being the person that sticks with it.
Reevaluating. Yeah.
Yes, girl. Yes, mama. Motherhood, really. I know. Yeah, I know. She's rolling her eyes. Okay, share with us like some final thoughts, some final words here for our listeners about maybe just getting started, just getting started with that path.
Yeah. Change comes in all different shapes and sizes, right? And just because you look at someone else's change, like we've just talked about some major changes we made in life that are huge. But somebody out there listening is struggling with something that now in that lens, they might be like, oh, well, my thing's so small. It's not small.
Yes.
What's hard for you is unique to you. And that is amazing in its own right that you recognize that it's hard for you. And my biggest thought to that person who is struggling through something, stuck in something, hesitant to do something, is don't reinvent the wheel. Someone's done it before you. Find that person. I used to tell people on Okinawa when they were new that don't live in someone else's Okinawa. People would always tell you, oh, the diving's amazing, go dive. And you're like, I hate swimming. Swimming sucks. But then you'd feel that weird guilt of like, oh, maybe I should take it up because somebody said I should. Oh, no. Find someone who's walked at least a couple of steps. They don't have to have done a mile, but walked a couple steps in the shoes that you're thinking about putting on and feel that, help them. I think I put in the book, cling to it like a unicorn pool float. Literally cling to that person who has walked part of your path before and get their wisdom and their resources and their advice. And that will kickstart your change, your stuckness, your all of it to get you to really move forward and to feel not alone. Change can be very lonely. And as we found out through the pandemic, with all of us sitting at home, working remotely, struggling with our things, forced to be alone, change can be lonely. And that thought and fear of being alone can get you stuck. And worse than stuck, just accepted, stagnant, whatever word you want to use, that can really bring you down and freeze you. I mentioned my dad in there in the book about his retirement and how he worked in public schools for 42 years. The guy, that's his thing. And he dramatically quit. It was just like, done. I don't need to do this anymore. And then it was the stuck because he just dropped it and did things that he thought he was supposed to do in retirement. He golfed, he had lunch with the guys, and those were all everybody else's things. And it wasn't until he really looked around and was like, well, this isn't my thing, that he realized I really didn't change and I still really need to. So yeah, somebody's done it before you. Find that person who's done it like you think you want to do it. Focus in on your values, and then use your resources and network. That's how successful change comes about. Don't go it alone, and don't reinvent the wheel.
Beautiful, Sarah. Okay, I know that many of our listeners are going to say, I totally resonate with this. How can I reach out to you? So of course I will share, after we end this recording, but just tell us, where can everybody find you? How can they reach out to you? Where can they get your book?
Yeah, the book is on Amazon. It's all about change, how to successfully make personal life change. And it's in paperback right now. It's also an ebook. There's a journal. I got a journal made.
Fantastic.
That is only on my website, and my website is inwiththenewYou.com. That's the easiest way to find me. But if you're on Instagram or you're on Facebook or LinkedIn, I'm on all of those. Instagram is Sarah_Carter_coach. Facebook is New You Coaching LLC. And then on Instagram, I am Sarah Jones Carter. So
Beautiful.
Reach out.
Thank
I
you.
am here. I want to help.
And are you taking new clients right now?
Yes, the doors are open.
That's important.
Emma is going to full-time daycare, and I am accepting new clients. Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Yes, everyone, please reach out to Sarah. Thank you so much for being on today, for having this raw conversation with me. It's always so fun to chat with you, and I know that's so valuable for our listeners. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you for having me.
Have a great day.
You too.
Thanks for listening to this heartfelt and super raw episode with author and coach Sarah Carter. Hop over to Apple Podcasts, please, and leave us a review. It means so much for this podcast and to Sarah and I. And if you've already left a review, it's okay to go back and leave another review and say specifically that you found this episode valuable. Remember to go on over to Sarah's website at inwiththenewYou to get Sarah's book. You can also follow Sarah on Instagram at Sarah Jones Carter. On Facebook, she's New You Coaching LLC. And that was on LinkedIn. LinkedIn, she's Sarah Jones Carter. And Instagram, she's Sarah_Carter_coach. And of course, we'll always link to everything in the show notes about her. Thank you tons for listening. I love talking about change. I feel like it's something that people will wait around their whole entire life to make happen. And, this life is so short. It's so short, and your decisions every day are extremely powerful. So if you resonated with this just even a little bit, we encourage you to look at the vision that you have for your life and what you could be stepping into if you make some small decisions every day, go through the steps that Sarah talks about, and really live your highest and most valuable life, because you only have this one chance in this body. Thanks so much for listening. Having this podcast means so much to me, and having you as loyal listeners, sharing this podcast, talking about it with your friends and on your Instagram means the world. Thanks again, and I'll talk with you next time. And as of this recording, today is Tuesday, February 8th. Soul School for Entrepreneurs is open right now. So if you're a woman in business, specifically a service-based business owner, and I'm speaking mostly to yogis, energy healers, anyone providing a service online, personal trainers, wellness professionals, people that have mostly in-person businesses, and you're thinking, I just could never take my business online. I don't even want to see myself on a video, or I don't like the sound of my voice, or people really need to see my coaching in person. Well, no, you're getting left behind, and I don't want that for you. My program, Soul School, helps female entrepreneurs take their business online, even if you're scared as heck. So Soul School is open right now. If you want to have a little taste of what that is all about, you can grab my masterclass called Service Based to Thousands, so you can learn more about my coaching. But over at AnniePeguero.com, that's where you'll see all of it. Thanks again for listening, and I'm looking forward to working with you.